This is Mark Gunn Media.
Hit it!
Welcome to Gunshots Straight from the Hip. I'm your host, Mark Gunn. The views expressed on this program are those of the host and guests and not necessarily reflective of anyone or any entity associated with this broadcast. This episode, justice? Yeah, but don't celebrate just yet. I want to personally thank everybody who has subscribed to the podcast, and remember, you can download it at markgunmedia.com, iTunes, Spotify, iHeartRadio, YouTube, Google Podcasts, envision-radio.com, or wherever you download your podcasts. I also want to thank those of you that listen from anywhere in the U.S. and around the world. Bonjour to our listeners in France. Guten Tag to those of you listening in Germany. To my friends in Ireland. Dia Huch. Apa kabar Indonesia. Konnichiwa Japan. To my family in Nigeria. In Leo. Hello to my neighbors to the north in Canada. Hello Bangladesh. Hola to my friends in Brazil. G'day in Australia. And hello to those of you listening in the UK. We would love to hear from you, and you can reach out to us by going to our website at markgunmedia.com or through envision-radio.com. This episode, we're taking a look at what happened this week at the conviction of Derek Chauvin, the former Minneapolis police officer who murdered George Floyd. Like a lot of Americans, I was anxious. I felt a kind of nervousness that I hadn't felt since the 92 riots and the verdict of the 4 police officers that beat Rodney King. In fact, I was on my radio show here in Louisville when the verdict came down, and we carried it live.
Members of the jury, I will now read the verdicts as they will appear in the permanent records of the 4th Judicial District. State of Minnesota, County of Hennepin, District Court, 4th Judicial District. State of Minnesota Plaintiff versus Derek Michael Chauvin, Defendant. Verdict, Count 1. Court File Number 27, CR 20-12646. We, the jury, in the above entitled matter as to Count 1, unintentional second-degree murder while committing a felony, find the defendant guilty. This verdict agreed to this 20th day of April, 2021 at 1:44 p.m. Signed, Juror Foreperson, Juror Number 19. Same caption, verdict Count 2. We, the jury, in the above entitled matter as to Count 2, third-degree murder, perpetrating an eminently dangerous act, find the defendant guilty. This verdict agreed to this 20th day of April, 2021 at 1:45 p.m. Signed by Jury Foreperson, Juror Number 19. Same caption, verdict Count 3. We, the jury, in the above entitled matter as to Count 3, second-degree manslaughter, culpable negligence, creating an unreasonable risk, find the defendant guilty. This verdict agreed to this 20th day of April, 2021 at 1:45 p.m. Jury Foreperson 019. Members of the jury, I'm now going to ask you individually if these are your true and correct verdicts. Please respond yes or no. Juror Number 2, are these your true and correct verdicts?
Yes.
Juror Number 9, are these your true and correct verdicts?
Yes.
Juror Number 19, are these your true and correct verdicts?
Yes.
Juror Number 27, are these your true and correct verdicts?
Yes.
Juror Number 44, are these your true and correct verdicts?
Yes.
Juror Number 52, are these your true and correct verdicts?
Yes.
Juror Number 55, are these your true and correct verdicts?
Yes.
Juror Number 79, are these your true and correct verdicts?
Yes.
Juror Number 85, are these your true and correct verdicts?
Yes.
Juror Number 89, are these your true and correct verdicts?
Yes.
Juror Number 91, are these your true and correct verdicts?
Yes.
Juror Number 92, are these your true and correct verdicts?
Yes.
Are these your verdicts? So say you one, so say you all.
Yes.
Members of the jury, I find that the verdicts as read reflect the will of the jury and will be filed accordingly. I have to thank you on behalf of the people of the state of Minnesota for not only jury service, but heavy-duty jury service.
Reaction ranged from exuberance to disappointment and very measured because of a recognition that this is a small crack in a 400-year-old wall of racism.
One down, many, many more to go. But I think about that young girl who brought out her cell phone and who stood there in horror, not knowing what to do, but just holding that phone steady. She did the right thing. All those community members who came and begged and pleaded and talked, they did the right thing. That EMT person did the right thing. When people called the police on the police, they did the right thing. When the police chief fired this man, he did the right thing. When people marched by the millions, they did the right thing. And part of what I think the message has to be is that we have to get more involved. It started with that young girl. She got involved. And then you had a community stand up, and you had a governor step in and take the case and give it to Keith Ellison to make sure that it was done the right way. This is the beginning of something. This is not the end of anything. This is the beginning of something. Where is Congress? They need to act. Those chokeholds are still legal according to federal government. That needs to change. There's no duty to intervene from the federal government. That needs to change. There's no registry for cops like Chauvin. That needs to change. You know, when you have somebody like, Representative Karen Bass and Tim Scott fighting, we need to get behind them. This should never happen again. One down, many more to go. Sometimes when we fight, we lose, but sometimes when we fight, we won. The people won.
If anything, Americans are finally starting to realize that there are systemic problems within America's police departments. As a matter of fact, this case may not even come to light because of a lie that the Minneapolis Police Department was willing to tell.
The Minneapolis Police Department told us on May 25th of last year, after George Floyd died. On Monday evening, shortly after 8 p.m., officers from the Minneapolis Police Department responded to the 3700 block of Chicago Avenue South on a report of a forgery in progress. 2 officers arrived and located the suspect, a male believed to be in his 40s, in his car. He was ordered to step from his car. After he got out, he physically resisted officers. Officers were able to get the suspect into handcuffs and noted he appeared to be suffering medical distress. Officers called for an ambulance. He was transported to Hennepin County Medical Center by ambulance, where he died a short time later. End of story. End of police story. That was it. That was the lie they were going to get away with. That was the lie the police officers involved in the killing of George Floyd were going to get away with. No police officer was going to contradict that story. Not one of those cops on the scene was ever going to tell the truth about what happened to George Floyd. Never. But their story fell apart overnight thanks to one person. Darnella Frazier had been on this earth for less than half the time of Derek Chauvin's time on this earth, but at 17 years old, she knew how to do the right thing. Darnella Frazier aimed her phone at Derek Chauvin and George Floyd and held it and recorded every minute of what Derek Chauvin did to George Floyd. Even when Derek Chauvin threatened her with mace, Darnella Frazier held her ground and she kept recording. She then posted her video on Facebook, and the police lie instantly began to crumble.
Probably close to midnight, a community member had contacted me and said, Chief, almost verbatim, but said, Chief, have you seen the video of your officer choking and killing that man at 30th in Chicago? And so once I heard that statement, I just knew it wasn't the same milestone camera video that I had saw. And eventually, within minutes after that, I saw for the first time what is now known as the bystander video.
Darnella Frazier changed the police chief's mind about what happened on that street, and the next day, Derek Chauvin was fired. When Darnella Frazier testified in the trial, she said she wished she did more.
When I look at George Floyd, I look at my dad, I look at my brothers, I look at my cousins, my uncles, because they are all black. I have a black father, I have a black brother, I have black friends. And I look at that and I look at how that could have been one of them. It's been nights. I stayed up apologizing and apologizing to George Floyd for not doing more and not physically interacting and not saving his life. But it's like, it's not what I should have done. It's what he should have done.
All 3 of the other police officers on the scene could have done more. Each one of them could have intervened and knocked Derek Chauvin off George Floyd's neck. But they did not have Darnella Frazier's courage. They did not have Darnella Frazier's sense of duty to the sanctity of another, the sanctity of life of another human being. Derek Chauvin is in jail tonight, awaiting a sentence that could leave him in prison for the rest of his life. And that happened because Darnella Frazier pressed record on her phone, because she knew something had to be done for George Floyd, and that was the only thing she could do. Tonight, on her Facebook page, where she posted her video of George Floyd taking his last breath, Darnella Frazier wrote, "I just cried so hard this last hour. My heart was beating so fast. I was so anxious, anxiety buzzing through the roof. But to know guilty on all 3 charges, thank you, God. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. George Floyd, we did it. Justice has been served."
Were it not for Darnella Frazier, Derek Chauvin and the Minneapolis Police Department would have gotten away with another murder. But what's next for him and the officers involved?
Just in terms of possible jail time, prison time, what is this officer now facing?
Well, the charges are with the highest one. Normally it's 40 years and 25 years and 10 years. But again, it's a sentencing grid based on his criminal history. You're looking at a presumptive sentence, they call it, of about, I believe, 12 or more years. But again, there's the aggravating factor stage going now, where the judge will now look at the fact that this happened in front of a child, that Floyd was a particularly vulnerable person, and the power dynamic of a police officer doing this to a civilian. And the judge can now take into consideration on that sentencing guideline that has that full range, these aggravating factors to decide whether it should go to the maximum or lower to the minimum mandatories in this instance. And so along that range. So right now, we are a few weeks out from the judge making that decision. And then about 8 weeks out, we're told about the final sentence and what that will be. And in the meantime, there's going to be what's called a pre-sentence report that talks to Derek Chauvin, asks about things like remorse, ways in which to rehabilitate him. He's not going away for life. And so we always have to have a way to have a holistic sentence to re-welcome someone into society. And that begins at this particular stage, even after a conviction.
For you, seeing Derek Chauvin out in handcuffs, what was that like?
Well, I juxtapose it to who we also saw let off in handcuffs, and that was George Floyd. And had he been let off with the same level of dignity that Derek Chauvin was afforded as somebody who had the process of a trial, had the due process, then we wouldn't even be here today. And when you think about all it would have taken to not be where we are right now, all it would have taken, the idea of leading a man, not putting him in a prone position, not manipulating his handcuffs, not pressing your knee to his neck, not ignoring the beseeching of trying to get him off the neck, Derek Chauvin would not have been led away today. If we didn't have this videotape, there is no doubt in my mind this would have come down to a medical incident. He would remain nameless, and not somebody's name who would have been the first thing that the closing began with. Remember, they said his name was George P. Floyd, born October 14th, 1973. This began and ended with somebody having the ability to say the name, to be able to be led off with dignity, and that was denied. And we saw what it looks like when you get the opportunity in a court of law.
So the trial is set to begin for the other officers involved in George Floyd's murder on August 23rd. Right now, I want to play part of a conversation I had with one of my oldest friends the day of the verdict being announced. Again, this is during my radio show this week. He is Minnesota State Senator John Hoffman. He actually knew and worked with George Floyd, and I wanted to get his take on how things were going there in Minnesota because, one, he's always been a good source for everything happening in the State House. He does a hell of a job. And two, that's my friend. I wanted to make sure he and his family were safe.
Mark Gunn, we are covering the verdict in the Derek Chauvin murder case. We heard from State Senator Gerald Neal just a little bit ago, but I wanted to get a little bit closer to home. And closer to home means right in the state of Minnesota. So I reached out to my brother from another mother, who is a Minnesota State Senator. John Hoffman is on the line with us. John, how you doing today, baby?
Good to hear your voice, Mark. And I'm kind of speechless because I was in the car when the verdict was being read. I was on my way to leave the Capitol because nobody knew what was happening, and so. But it's good to be here talking to you.
And speaking of which, I know there was a lot of action as it relates to the National Guard. I was able to talk with your wife Yvette.
Chicago Avenue, that's where that is, and it is there. I mean, in to be part of what was happening, last summer with what was going on, and now today's verdict, man. Mark, this is an important step for justice. Mm-hmm. The trial is over, but now our work has only begun. I mean, this is now, as the world watched George Floyd die mm-hmm. because somebody killed him, for 9 minutes and 29 seconds. It's just, to see thousands of people, marching in the streets, inspiring a movement around the globe for change. Mm-hmm. And now a year later, the gentleman who killed George Floyd has been found guilty of murder, 3 charges, and then.
Right.
That's accountability. Mark, that's accountability, but it's only the first movement toward accountability.
And I know, as ancillary as we are, everybody else from around the country in this whole process, you being pretty much in the thick of it, what has it been like in the State House and in the overall community with all of that activity over the last year for you?
The insecurity in the state capitol, or unknown threats that are not allowing us to go out,
right.
On the Capitol, having State Patrol, this more State Patrol officer mm-hmm. in the state of Ohio showed up to roll, and then to have the National Guard, and they're full armored. And I know you talked to Yvette, and you saw, we shared with you the photos that I sent her just on the armored vehicles, because nobody knew.
Right. Nobody knew exactly what was going on. So they ended up sending you guys home, right?
Yeah. Today we were up, and we just finished up a housing omnibus bill. And then all of a sudden, one of the State Patrol said, a verdict. And they're going to, it's going to go and,
Okay. Coming up, more with Minnesota State Senator John Hoffman and his relationship with George Floyd as we continue with Gunshots Straight from the Hip. For downloads of this and past episodes and information about all the multimedia services we offer, log on to our website at www.markgunmedia.com. That's markgunmedia.com. Welcome back to Gunshots Straight from the Hip. We are dealing with the verdict in the Derek Chauvin murder trial, guilty on all 3 counts in the murder of George Floyd.
We, the jury, in the above entitled matter as to count 1, unintentional second-degree murder while committing a felony, find the defendant guilty. This verdict agreed to this 20th day of April, 2021 at 1:44 p.m. Signed, juror foreperson, juror number 19. Same caption, verdict count 2. We, the jury, in the above entitled matter as to count 2, third-degree murder, perpetrating an eminently dangerous act, find the defendant guilty. This verdict agreed to this 20th day of April, 2021 at 1:45 p.m. Signed by jury foreperson, juror number 19. Same caption, verdict count 3. We, the jury, in the above entitled matter as to count 3, second-degree manslaughter, culpable negligence, creating an unreasonable risk, find the defendant guilty. This verdict agreed to this 20th day of April, 2021 at 1:45 p.m.
On the phone, I am with Minnesota State Senator John Hoffman, who is one of my oldest friends, and he's been able to give us firsthand and up close and personal type of reaction as to what's going on in the state. And John, I understand this is something that a whole lot of people don't know because the media did a poor job in actually talking about this. And that was the work that George Floyd was doing with the homeless.
Yeah, the Bishop Harding Smith from Brooklyn Park. We would be involved, and Yvette and I would go down and help feed homeless, right? Mm-hmm. For the bishop and the Oromo Women organization. And George was a huge impact. And I'll give you an example that they would get tickets to the Twins, the Twins when the Twins would win a couple games or so. But George would take kids, homeless kids, right, mm-hmm. that had never been inside a baseball stadium. He would be the one to take all these kids to a Twins baseball game, right? I mean, he was there, and the thing that people didn't see is he gave himself. He was always there volunteering for the homeless that were in Minneapolis, and the same as like Bishop Harding Smith, who once himself was homeless, right? And so, when you're dealing in recovery like George was, and knowing that, he gave himself to folks. I mean, and nobody knew that about him. Nobody really knew that, and we brought that out last year when we had were down there for the Homeless Day, a feeding again, and talked about, just the work that George had done volunteering down there, right? And so, to take kids. I mean, imagine that. You got nobody in your life to be able to take you to a baseball game, and then all of a sudden this guy says, "Let's get in the van and go. We got tickets. We're going to a baseball game." I mean, that's who he was.
Right.
So,
So the community lost somebody that was very important to it, and I think that that and the fact that the way that he was killed in the manner that he was killed, and the fact that the world saw it, just brings a little more light to this. So the conversation has been going on for a while regarding police reform and the steps that need to be taken all across the country in order to prevent this from happening again. And as our state senator pointed out again, even though we have this verdict, it's what's next, because chances are it will happen again. I mean, you had a 13-year-old kid that was shot down in Chicago. And here in Louisville, we had a local activist who had his face punched in while being handcuffed. So there's still a huge problem. And so, and I know how active you are in the Minnesota State House, and I know how active your whole family is, and I think that's one of the reasons why we've been family for so long.
Right.
Has the Minnesota State House addressed this in any meaningful way, or what's next?
This past special sessions, we brought some reform in on when it has a licensed police officer, which is the post. It's the police officer standardized training stuff. They brought some some reform in there, some small. But you know what? Nothing can bring George back, right? But justice does not stop with this guilty verdict, right? Our work is far from done, but it's not just locally, but federally. Some of these holds are still being done in other states, and we need our federal compadres to come forward and say enough's enough here in order to improve accountability in our criminal justice system. We are still in pain and trauma no matter where you're at, right? I mean, we had one brief moment right now as the individual was being handcuffed, right?
Right.
That's justice, Mark. There are kids, and me, when I ran a juvenile detention facility in my 20s, and kids with lesser crimes would go and spend 20 years, right? I mean, and had no justice, right? And so there was justice finally to be on all three counts, but this guilty verdict hopefully will bring some closure, but it doesn't bring George back, right? And we have to stop and prevent the next killing of an unarmed, nonviolent black Minnesotan or black individual anywhere in the nation, at any hands. And here's the other thing within that, people forget to also mention that a large percentage, over 50 to 60% of people that are killed by law enforcement are people with a disability, right? So now you got a whole aspect of mental health in there saying, or whatever that may be, what are we doing to give more tools in the tool belt for somebody to be able to deal with some community issues that seem to be there, right? So, we truly got to keep this work continuing. We run into a problem in Minnesota is, there's the chairs. When you're the chair of a committee, you basically control what bills you get to hear and what bills you don't get to hear, right? And I'm not the chair of any committee. I'm the lead on Health and Human Services, and we've done some great work there. But, with our own structure, the current chair doesn't want to hear a lot of these bills. And I don't know what's stopping him from doing that, right? And so it's really getting those chairs of committees to say, look, we did a little bit of police reform, but we really need to do some more. We got to give those guys more tools in their tool belt. We got to make sure. Why should it, for example, Hennepin County, the largest county in the Twin City or in the state of Minnesota, right? That's where Minneapolis is, in Hennepin County. It took arms dragging and anything for the sheriff just to get a social worker assigned to his Plymouth
Wow.
One of his Plymouth. I mean, it took him years. He had to, beg, borrow, and steal in order to get a social worker, a much-needed social worker to help not only those folks that are needing help within the community, but the law enforcement people themselves. And so you got to have a holistic look at this. The real reform is about looking at it holistically, Mark. And I think this statement, that happened right now with the 3 justice statements now says, all right, now we need to do real reform. And what that real reform means, it's got to be healing and closure in the community. Does that make sense?
That makes a lot of sense. And with that, John, I'm going to say thank you for taking a couple of seconds out to call. In fact, I'll hit you back in a few minutes. And again, a huge sigh of relief nationally as Derek Chauvin has been found guilty of 3 counts in the murder of George Floyd. What happens next? Who knows? But we will keep watching.
That was my longtime friend, Minnesota State Senator John Hoffman, telling us about what's happening in Minnesota in light of the Derek Chauvin murder conviction. Like I said at the beginning of this episode, there's a lot of people that are celebrating, but we've got a long, long way to go. Derek Chauvin is only the 7th police officer convicted of murder since 2005. Put this into perspective. With the overwhelming numbers of cases that you've heard about since then involving unarmed black people, 7 convictions since 2005. There's a whole lot of work to be done, and you and I have to be on the front lines of getting that done. That means pressuring your politicians, pressuring your police departments, and pressuring each other. So here's hoping that George Floyd's family can get some peace, and here's hoping that this is the beginning of some real and substantive change in the way that policing is done in this country. We'll see you next week.
You've been listening to Gunshots Straight from the Hip. The views expressed are those of the host and guests and not reflective of any business entity or anyone associated with this broadcast. If you have any comments or want more information on how to be a sponsor, log on to our website at markgunmedia.com or call us at 502-407-0283. That's 502-407-0283. Thank you for listening.
Mark Gun Media. No hype, no hoopla, just damn good work.